Hello and welcome, anybody, everybody, but probably nobody. This is ThorW bringing you another episode of the PvP Basics in Dungeon Fighter Online. So, in our last episode, we went through the basics of hit stun, grabbing, and super armor mechanics, the very basics of them. In this episode, I want to cover our basic offense that all classes have to worry about, the approach. Now, what do I mean when I say approach? Approach is using skills to catch opponents and then being able to follow up and inflict damage on them with some sort of combo. Whether it be a short 2 or 3 hit string, or one of those big, long, 25 hit super strings. So, there are multiple forms of approach that I want to cover today, and every class has different kinds of approach that they're able to use. Some classes are more defensive than others, some classes are more offensive than others, but in this episode we're covering the more offensive aspects of this right now. So, first off, the most basic approach we've got, the very simplest approach, is the hit stun approach. The hit stun approach makes use of the fact that when you make contact with an opponent, you are able to then follow up with some sort of attack to open them up into a combo. While they're in that flinching animation, you take advantage of that hit stun to follow up with some sort of move. Whether it be a grab, whether it be another hit, anything like that. Once they are hit stunned, you decide you are able to follow up because they are in the flinching animation and unable to do anything while they're hit stunned like that. For example, I walk up to this guy, bam, I just approached him. He got hit stunned, and I'm able to follow up with some more stuff and do some damage to him. Easy peasy. Very simple hit stun approach, but usually a normal attack ain't gonna get it, so bam, bam. Very simple. Bam. So some of the advantages of the hit stun approach is the fact that usually you will have relatively long range for this kind of approach. So using that long range, especially if you're, say, a gunner or something like that, using that long range kind of approach, you're able to cover, generally it's going to be a pretty good X-axis angle. So for the hit stun approach, again, you just make use of the fact that once you've hit an opponent, they are stuck in the getting hit animation, and then you follow up with some sort of simple combo, and it can be simple, it can be advanced, whatever it may be. Whatever it may be, once you've got that hit stun, that is when you do the follow-up. So the second type of approach I'd like to talk about is the super armor approach. This is a stronger version than the hit stun approach. It is the same basic concept, is you will use a skill to approach your enemy and then use the hit stun in order to open them up for a combo, but with the added benefit of having super armor available for yourself. For example, we've got this gunner here, and gunners are a little hard to approach because they can fire from a distance. I don't want to get hit by him, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to super armor. And thus, he can't touch me while I'm super armor. Nice and safe, very simple. So like I said before, approaching with super armor, much safer. Once he fires at me, super armor, and I go right through every attack he goes. One thing to remember about super armor, though, is it does get beat out by grabs. So remember, super armor does let you get that safer approach and lets you get through that tough spot. For example, getting through this hail of bullets and grenades, normally impossible. However, with the help of super armor, able to go right through in there and follow through onto my opponent. Alright guys, so the next approach I'd like to talk to you about is the launch approach. And this entails getting up to your opponent in some way, shape, or form, and then launching them into the air for a juggle. Now this can be done in many ways, but for example, something like that. Or if I was actually just playing a normal monk, then getting through this hail of bullets into something like that, and then launching them and following up. So for example, for why the launch approach is such a good one, and generally the most common one you're going to see. Most classes, if not all classes, have very good juggle strings that they like to take advantage of. And the fact of the matter is that usually the launch approach is going to be the more common, if not better, approach for a class. And it sets up their juggle string, which is generally going to be their strongest string of damage. Because once you have an enemy launched, they generally can't do much to counter it. If your opponent is on the ground, and you're trying to combo them there, it can get countered by a move called Quick Rebound, which we'll talk about later in this series. So for example, this guy here, he's running around, he's giving me trouble, he's throwing grenades, he's shooting guns and stuff, and we don't like that, so obviously what do we want to do? We want to get up to him, we want to launch him, and then we want to set up whatever combo we want afterwards, whether it just be something simple or something a lot more advanced afterwards. Okay, so the next kind of approach I'd like to talk to you guys about is the Y-axis approach. So, the left and right is considered our X-axis, the up and down considered our Y-axis. Most of what I've been showing you so far generally uses the X-axis as its approach, at least for most of what the classes that I've shown you. But a lot of classes like to make use of the Y-axis and take advantage of that. Most attacks are going to come from the X-axis. Right here, this basic combo string, mainly from the X-axis. This from the X-axis, X-axis, X-axis. So any moves that hit along the Y-axis are highly helpful. So in your approach, if you're, say, above your opponent, below your opponent, and you have one of these Y-axis moves, it's very good to know exactly how to use it and how to follow up on it. So right there, I completely missed, but right here, I'm going to go ahead and hit. And it's good to make sure that you don't whiff this, and that you're not punished, and to know exactly what kind of angles you're working with. And that way you can go from something very simple like a basic Y-axis into a follow-up. And remember guys, even classes that are extremely reliant on X-axis moves and have have mainly just moves based around the X-axis, like something like Monk, do have Y-axis approaches. So every class does have this in their repertoire, and it's good to be aware of when they can bust it out and when you should be able to bust it out. Alright guys, so the final kind of approach I want to talk to you about is a knockdown approach, or a grab into a throw to the ground, which a lot of classes do have. So what this basically entails is in hitting your opponent and smashing them onto the ground. Now from there, you may or may not have the ability to follow up very well, depending on what kind of class you have. As you can see, Monk doesn't have a lot of tools to follow up to something like someone getting smacked onto the ground. So sometimes it's only going to be a combo finisher, sometimes it's going to be a little bit more in your bread and butter. So what are the advantages of a knockdown or an OTG sort of approach to your opponent? If you have a class that is good at OTG on-the-ground combos, it becomes very helpful. And remember, the knockdown approach doesn't necessarily have to come from the X-axis. There are plenty of hits that create shock waves, much like that, which you can use from the Y-axis to knock your opponent down onto the ground, and then you can get a little bit of a follow-up onto them. And remember guys, the best approaches combine multiple concepts of the basics, combine them together, and create the best approach possible. allowing you to catch your opponent off guard and hit them with a powerful combo and take a big chunk out of their health bar. So combine those approaches together and make the strongest approach you possibly can. So thank you guys very much for watching so far. I hope that this gives you a good idea of how to approach your opponents in the DFO PvP ring. There are certainly many different ways to approach them and many different ways that you can follow up. For now, you guys are going to have to experiment a little bit on your own with your classes. I can't get into too many... I using specific classes to give examples, but I can't get too class specific because I'm trying to make this all around in general right now. We'll get into class specifics sometime later down the line, but for now we're keeping it very broad and general for all of you guys. So remember the basics of what I said. The hit stun approach that allows you to follow up after getting a flinch animation. The super armor approach, very similar to the hit stun approach, but with the added benefit of super armor on yourself so that if they try and counterattack, you're going to beat them out. The launcher approach, which knocks them up into the air, lets you juggle them right afterwards. The Y-axis approach, which lets you hit them from above them or below them, allowing you the advantage of staying safe from their X-axis attacks that they may have to try and approach onto you. And finally, the knockdown, or the grab into an OTG approach, where you knock them down onto the ground and then you follow up with some sort of on-the-ground combo, which this works a little better for some classes than others. And as always, there's going to be a few exceptions to how these particular grabs work, how these particular OTGs work. Again, class-specific stuff. So I hope you guys learned something, I hope you guys enjoyed this particular video, and I hope that you guys will do me the favor of going down to the description below. Well, not quite the description, right above that, there's a little button that says subscribe, there's a little button next to it that says like. If you hit those, I'd be really happy. Also check in the description below for the link to the PvP Basics tutorial playlist for DFO. This is video number 2 in that. Go watch video number 1 if you haven't seen it so far. I have a monk guide on how to PvE in the late game. Goes very in-depth on the skills to use, how run through the dungeons, stuff like that. How to do it mainly with very poor, very weak gear. It'll get you through there. And finally, I'm going to be continuing this particular series. I'm trying to get a video out every day. Hopefully I'll be able to meet that quota. So thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And I'll see you guys out there in the PvP arena. Bye-bye, everybody.